Hmm. Uh, huh?
You're listening to Cryptid Clues, featuring your hosts, Taylor Field and Reuben Olson.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Cryptid Clues. I'm your host, Reuben Olson, joined by our other main man, Taylor Field. Today, we're slipping up with some memory-wiping baddies. I forget what they called themselves, the men in something? Well, I remember one thing for sure, and it's that you should be sure to check us out at CryptidClues.ca, send us an email at CryptidClues@gmail.com, join our Patreon for as low as $1 for ad-free exclusive content and rewards at patreon.com/CryptidClues. And finally, you can find us on almost all social media. So let's get started with a famous conspiracy that started all the way back in 1947. Taylor, you take the lead.
Yes, well, I mean, like all conspiracies, there's usually a government component attached to it. And when it comes to UFOs, there is one such agency that seems to be at the core, particularly at this time period. This mysterious group has been attributed to silencing witnesses, harassment, threats, and even assassinations. But who do they work for? Is it a branch of government or an entirely separate body of operations unknown to our worldly governments? One thing's for certain. Throughout our history, these well-dressed agents have been reoccurring at many prominent unexplainable events. And back in the 50s and 60s, UFOologists often associated men in black with a conspiracy mindset, leading to a mass paranoia and fear that they would become targets themselves of this shadow organization. And usually when these characters do appear, they're often in groups, and as you can guess, they're dressed in all black clothing. And
can you imagine if they were a different one, like the men in pink?
The men in pink.
The men in pink, the men in plaid. Oh, that's our Canadian version. There we go.
The men in plaid. I love that.
You've seen some things, eh? I need you to forget about that.
They're definitely up north, the men in plaid, that's for sure. So black vehicles, SUVs, these are all the kind of things like you would see in the movies typically.
Oh, then we'd have plaid vehicles. Sorry, I'll stop interrupting.
Plaid vehicles. Okay, I work in the industry of like wrapping vehicles. I would love to actually take an SUV and just put plaid vinyl wrapping around it. That would be so much fun.
And Canadian.
Yeah, very, very Canadian. Sometimes cars too, not being wrapped. I mean, being wrapped, but used by the men in black specifically. So a little bit of both, but they often act very peculiar too in how they talk and their mannerisms. But again, what are they? Some people believe that they're like a damage control group that comes in and helps clean up and rectify a situation post-alien UFO occurrence. And others believe there's more of a demonic component actually attached to it. Specifically, ufologist John Keel claimed to have had encounters with men in black and referred to them as demonic supernaturals. And then, of course, there's the idea that they are simply aliens themselves. So we got a whole little mixture of what people kind of believe they are, but at their core, they're definitely odd, peculiar, and show up when you probably don't want anyone showing up at your door most after something happens. So let's get into some witness experiences here, starting with the earliest reported Men in Black encounter. Maori, I never say this name right. The Maori, it's like the TV show.
Maui?
Maui, yeah, welcome. Maui. Is that what it said? Maui?
Yeah, Maui. You're welcome.
Oh, Maui.
What can I say?
You're screwing with me. It's not Maui. Is it? There's an R in there. There's totally, the R has to have some emphasis in there. Maori. It's gotta be Maori. Island incident. Harold Dahl. Harold Dahl and his son were salvaging logs on a fishing boat when they spied 6 donut-shaped crafts flying in the air above them.
Ooh, that sounds tasty. Mm-hmm. I want donuts.
The crafts drop molten waste onto the lake, which allegedly kills Dahl's dog and injures his son.
Oh, I no longer want donuts. Holy.
No. A few days later, after talking about the affairs with his Boston friends, he was visited by a mysterious man dressed in all black. The man urged him not to discuss the encounter. Not long after, he was also visited by several Air Force agents who were said to be on a mission to gather information. And Dahl's story definitely got the attention of various law enforcement agencies in the United States, leading to the FBI to write a report on the matter. And I quote, "Not long after the encounter with the men in black, Dahl claimed that the whole thing was a hoax, but recanted years after, having allegedly made the first confession under duress." That I find very interesting. Pushed to this brink where you are scared, frightened, especially your son is injured. You don't know what the hell's going on. Your dog's been killed. And now people are telling you to be quiet and you just put it out that's a hoax.
And later reports of Men in Black would also have them quoting people saying that they're going to come after their family and their wives and children and stuff if they tell a story or whatever. Did we get a description of the Men in Black from this guy at all? Because he described them in detail.
Let's see. No, I didn't pull any specifics from him. I do have a description of them from another individual, but I don't have the description coming from Harold Dahl.
Okay. That's one of the things I find most interesting about them is how they're always described the same way. But you carry on.
So clearly the level of pressure and stress was contributing to the man's mental state of mind, but this degree of concern and stress, again, it's a powerful tool. And the fear that these men in black seem to possess can be life-altering. And like in regards to Dr. Albert K. Bender, he was a well-written and prominent researcher who funded the International Flying Saucer Bureau. And in 1955, his work was about to shed some serious light on developments pertaining to UFO government cover-ups. And coincidentally, as he was getting prepared to release documentation, evidence to prove that the U.S. government was indeed taking information in and had a lot of connections and ties to UFOs, Bender claimed that 3 unknown men, all wearing black, approached him at his home and threatened him against pursuing the ideas of UFOs any further. Now, we know at this point in time, the government has come straight clean about UFOs, UAPs, with what they're monitoring and their footage and all that jazz. So that, again, in retrospect, adds a nice little bit of credibility to this claim here. Mm-hmm. Maybe not pertaining to the Men in Black, but pertaining to what this individual was trying to release. Go ahead.
I was just thinking now that you brought that up, it's interesting. I wonder what you would have to find out now to trigger a visit from the Men in Black. It'd have to be something more in depth now than just, I saw a UFO, because everybody sees those now.
Well, that's interesting you say that. That's one of the narrative changes, right? When you look back 50 years ago, you see an alien, you're going to be hushed. It's a very big thing. You see a spaceship, anything like that, it's huge. And people don't talk about that. But when you start running your mouth about these kinds of things back in the day, you're going to get some serious attention, newspapers, everything. Nowadays, you report it and you're a laughing stock. I mean, not to say you weren't a laughing stock back then, depending, but nowadays, like, you just get the shrug, like, oh yeah, whatever. The news anchor smiling, saying, seems like our own fair town has a local alien encounter of their own. Like, they just make it into some bullshit and they sugarcoat it.
That's very true. Although I would say, since the government's been admitting some of these things, that local news stations and stuff have been picking up these stories a little more seriously and just saying, hey, a resident saw a UFO. This is what they saw. They put it out there very plainly all of a sudden.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So it makes me wonder, again, like you said, if they're putting these stories out very monotonely, plainly, then what would be the kicker? Would it be actual footage of a real alien? Is that it? Like,
I guess that would have to be the next step, is like footage of some alien species, right?
Mm-hmm. Because obviously the ships aren't stirring the pot anymore. You can go on YouTube and watch compilations of UFO ships flying around, and nothing seems to be like the kicker there.
FBI knock on your door, and then the Men in Black come up and be like, hey, we need you to delete those YouTube links.
Yeah. Clear your hard drive. So those that knew Dr. Bender, they claimed he was a different person after his encounter. living a life of constant anxiety. And you have to remember as well that these individuals often know your history and personal life quite well. So it proves to be a valuable tool in instigating fear onto someone, so much that it would make them completely give up their study of UFOs or other inexplainable phenomena. You can imagine how traumatizing that is when, and we've seen that in movies too, these people show up at your door and they just start spitting facts like, hey, about your mother, your kids, your daughter, your wife, all that stuff, your husband. And then maybe they show you pictures too of your family members, and it just catches you so off guard, and usually local law enforcement's not going to be able to do much to help you in this. But I really feel for this individual that had to deal with that. Now, I have a article here, and it's dated back in the 40s. So when we're talking about this article off cast, you were saying again, like, this is probably around the kickstart of when Men in Black sightings were really occurring here. So this is in regards to flying discs that were sighted in Tacoma, Washington. And it's noted to the director of the FBI, and I quote, "Dear Sir, the following in general are the facts regarding the flying discs story that started by blank, which subsequently resulted in news stories by the Tacoma Times, the Boise Statesman, and the Chicago Times that a B-25 carrying Army intelligence officers was shot down or sabotaged by Khalil on August 1st, 1947, because it was carrying some flying disc fragments. The original story, as related by blank, was to the effect that blank, while patrolling in his boat near Maury Island, Washington, sighted 6 flying discs, one of which fluttered to the earth and disintegrated, showering his boat with fragments which caused some damage to the boat and killed his dog. Blank wrote a letter, blank Davis Company, which publishes fantastic adventure magazines in Chicago, sending him fragments of the flying disc and relating the above story. Blank requested Trans Radio News in Chicago to verify the story is related by blank, telegraph blank, confirming blank story. Blank then engaged blank, Boise, Idaho, who was the first to report a story regarding the flying disc, to come to Tacoma and check the story related by blank. Blank came to Tacoma, Washington, July 30th, 1947, and blank in his room 502 Winthrop Hotel, Tacoma, Washington. Blank also called to attend the meeting. Blank United Airlines pilot, who also reported seeing flying disc fragments, and Army intelligence to attend. And there's a whole bunch of other like stamps on here and all that stuff. So yes, this is again corroborates and reinforces that first encounter that we were talking about, where the individual was encountering Men in Black, but the dog and his son being injured wasn't really, as he claimed, was donuts shaped, but it was more like saucers, and one of them was not dumping stuff, but actually like breaking apart and crashing.
I mean, I'm trying to come up with something witty to say about that document, but I'm drawing a blank.
God damn. There's so many blanks. You can see it. There's so many stretches. Like, they were really keeping someone's name hidden in there. Oh my goodness.
I hate it when they have to censor so much and just fill it in with blanks.
Yeah, it's just a whole lot of Sharpie. Sharpies don't work like this nowadays. Sharpies these days, you draw something over, I'm like, I can still see what's written underneath the ink. You put the right light on there and you can still see it. But this is like some serious, like, alien advanced, like, Sharpie ink. You can't see anything. No names on these documents.
Well, hopefully this doesn't end up blank, but I'll shed some light on everything with an ad break. Welcome back, everybody. Ooh, that was a slightly spicy ad break. I could have done better.
I think that definitely fit in there nicely. That was pretty good. So earlier you mentioned the description. Now, Dr. Herbert Hopkins, he had an encounter in 1976 with a man in black. And I quote, "This character was as bald as an egg. He didn't even have eyebrows or eyelashes. It looked like he had a smooth plastic skin, like a doll, except that it was a dead white color. His lips were a brilliant ruby red, and he spoke in an expressionless, monotone, scanning speech. He constructed no phrases and sentences, just a sequence of words evenly spaced, and his voice was completely passive with no inflection or intonation, as if you were hearing it from a machine that could talk, end quote. Now, it just sounds so alien-like, just his description.
Yeah, it almost sounds like a Slender Man kind of deal.
Absolutely. That's funny
they're
you mentioned that.
incredibly tall, wearing a suit. I think Slender Man was based on the Men in Black, in a sense, for the design.
He's a creepy pasta, isn't that what
Yep.
Slender Man is? Yeah.
Yeah, that's all
okay.
Slender Man is.
Again, this sighting I would attribute it mostly to being along the lines of the alien. But does that mean, are we dealing with aliens that are trying to cover up alien encounters? Or are they humans?
Humans, government entities that are trying to cover up UFO stuffs, aliens that are maybe working in tandem with the government to cover up UFO stuff so they can keep going about their business, or demonic entities that are pretending to be human or alien entities to kind of muddy the waters, or pretend to be aliens that tell the government they're aliens and want to do all of those things combined. And every theory is true at the same time.
Yeah. So let me pitch this to you. What are your thoughts on reptilians? Because I know you and me we've enjoyed looking at some videos and seeing like, oh, this odd angle here of an individual turning, and you can see weird deformations, discolorations in their skin that shouldn't be there on these people. So would you think it's far to line for a reptilian to be posing as a human being, to knocking on doors and telling people to keep quiet?
I mean, if we go with the possibility that reptilians and these aliens are in fact real, I would say it's definitely possible that they could be pretending to be Men in Black. But also, if reptilians are real, there's probably other species and aliens that are real. Who's to say they couldn't also be Men in Black, or the Men in Black aren't their own hybrid or automaton type beings?
Okay, that's fair. Let me ask you this. So why do you think Men in Black sightings have... I mean, I know you have a little bit more information too of the last few decades or so, but why do you think Men in Black themselves have kind of just faded away a little bit?
I think that's because a lot of things have kind of normalized, come to light. We've been drip-fed a lot of alien imagery over the years. It's no longer a huge shocker. The only thing that would probably trigger some, like I was saying earlier, Men in Black probably wouldn't return unless you had some really damning evidence against the government hiding something still, something that's about to happen, or some scary race of alien beings that would just terrify everyone. Or maybe if like the demonic theory is true and you tried to do some research and expose aliens as in fact being demons, then you'd probably bring something in if the Men in Black are in fact real, going around and trying to shut people up.
So do you think that the Men in Black going around, they're doing it on behalf of the government? Is it their own self-interest? Or why would they really care about the government, I guess?
I think it's fun to think that. Or maybe they're just aliens that think humans are dumb and they'll just fall for it and like, oh, we'll just pretend to be their government and be like, don't say it, bad boy.
That's fair. I often wonder myself that, like with Bigfoot, I think you have different groups that are... they're financed by the government, but the government can still turn a blind eye. Like they're independent enough that the government can have the whole claim plausible deniability. Those are the key words there for tonight's show. I think that's a big thing with Bigfoot, sending out groups and task forces just to eliminate these things on behalf of the government, so the government doesn't have to actually know or pay attention to them. But like, oh, here's a few extra tax dollars here that we're going to shove your way. So
yeah, and it's funny you bring that up as well, because I sent you a little article this morning that was actually shared and posted on Reddit about certain big organizations turning blind eyes to things because it didn't line up with their religious viewpoints, or they were scared to expose something that would prove a religious theory.
So do you think, with that in mind, do you think the Men in Black could be primarily religious based or have a religious component attached to it and say, hey, this is getting out of line, like just dismiss this, keep it hidden because we want to keep this narrative progressing forward?
Oh, I have no idea at that point. That is getting pretty deep and beyond
Deep
me.
question.
As crazy as I can get sometimes.
That's fair. Well, Reuben, what do you got for some notes there?
Well, I've got a more recent one, and this is a pretty fun one, actually. So I kind of hinted to you at the beginning here, but for our listeners, I was teasing Taylor because he didn't get to finish all of his research on the Men in Black, and I kind of picked up with what he had and tried to look up something new. I found a celebrity that had a Men in Black encounter and was a very, very big believer of UFOs. I don't know if you can hear that engine outside.
Oh, I know which celebrity you're talking about.
Oh, do you?
Oh, it's got to be Dan Aykroyd.
Yeah, I was going to say,
Yeah.
who are you going to call out here?
Yeah.
So Dan Aykroyd isn't just a firm believer in ghosts, since capturing them in Ghostbusters as Ray Stantz. In fact, he believes in the paranormal and aliens wholeheartedly. Dan Aykroyd started himself in a documentary called Unplugged on UFOs, and is now also an endorser for MUFON, the Mutual UFO Network, that strives to expose any government cover-up of UFOs and investigate the phenomenon around the globe. But how did our beloved Ghostbuster get involved so deeply with UFOlogy? Well, he's kind of always been into the topic. After all, he was born during the same month and year of the Washington, D.C. mass sighting, where saucer-shaped objects appeared above the Capitol and triggered the release of military fighter jets to investigate. Being born in that month, you just grow up and be like, yeah, so like you're a baby that was born during like a mass alien sighting, and now we're just being told it was probably something else, or it's just being covered up. Who knows? I'd be interested in aliens too. I'd be like, yo, what's going on? And Dan Aykroyd isn't without plenty of happenings himself too, because, you know, having alien stuff happen to you definitely helps make you a firm believer in it. Here's a short but creepy one that he's kind of talked about. During a trip to New York in the 80s, Aykroyd said he awoke in the middle of the night telling his wife something outside wanted him to come see them. They're calling me. I want to go outside. Something outside wants me to come out and see them, he said. Aykroyd's wife convinced him to go back to sleep, but when he awoke in the morning, the news was buzzing with reports across Canada, New York, and Vermont reporting that thousands of people felt an urge the night before to go around outside at 3 a.m., whereupon they witnessed a several mile-high spiraling pink vortex. X-Files theme right here, right? So then, in 2002, while working on his first and currently unreleased documentary out there, so not the UFO documentary that exists now, but a totally different one that he was filming before, Aykroyd stepped outside for a cigarette, and he got a phone call from Britney Spears, who wanted to talk about an upcoming Saturday Night Live episode. While he was on the phone, and while he was taking this break, he was actually in the middle of filming the final episode for this documentary. So while he was on the phone, he said he turned and looked out onto 42nd Street in New York and noticed a black SUV with a couple of incredibly tall men dressed in black, giving him a blank, creepy frown. Aykroyd turned away for a split second and did a double take. As soon as his peripheral vision left and snapped back to the men in black, they were gone. The car had vanished. He was on a one-way street, and he cannot find an explanation for how he couldn't have seen or heard the men drive past him, especially within a single second. That image has stuck in his mind ever since. But here's what really solidifies this. 2 hours later, Aykroyd and the entire cast were told by the producer that the documentary had been cancelled, despite having almost all of its episodes filmed except the last. They were given no reason why, just that it would never air and that they were to pack up and go home. To this day, he still has not been told why it was cancelled. The documentary was set to highlight various extraterrestrial stories such as alien abductions, cattle mutilations, and crop circles. The show was cancelled so hard that all footage of it has been lost. So what was he on that had the Men in Black spooked? Was it some kind of cover-up? I wish we could hear from the producer why the documentary was canceled or what kind of interaction he had on the phone that took place to force his hand. But I suppose we'll never know.
You don't just cancel shows like that. You really don't. You a lot of these shows that they get put out, they flop, whatever. They don't make it past the first season. They just get a few episodes out. That's it. But back then, I feel like shows like that are very, very popular and prominent. So to cancel it, you're no doubt canceling it because you don't want someone to see something. There's something that you have done that is going to garner attention, and you have a pretty prominent name attached to it too. Again, that reinforces that. And like Dan Aykroyd he's huge. I've listened to him on the Joe Rogan Experience, and he's spoken to Bigfoot. He's a firm believer in that, and so many other things. Like, it really makes me wonder.
Right? I wish I knew what they had in that documentary that somebody didn't want out there. Because, man, that got canceled so quick.
Yeah. That's how many episodes did you say it was again?
8 episodes.
8 episodes. I wonder if they must have been like full hour-long episodes. Kind of like an Unsolved Mysteries kind of deal, I bet. But, yeah, that's something else. Do
you think it was the whole part of it? Like cattle mutilations, crop circles, abductions, all of that? Or do you think there was like one specific part somewhere in that documentary that caught the attention of somebody? And then who would it have been that found out about it and said, we can't release that, and went and talked to the producer and canceled it?
Well, who indeed? I was reading an interesting article that the CIA became prominent at infiltrating different UFO groups and putting, I guess, a spy in these groups to create like disinformation and to kind of like crack them up a little bit, I guess, to kind of like break their narrative and like create a ripple effect to stop what they were doing, to slow them down, to derail them is what I'm trying to say. So if you have
setting forth a group of people in the middle of a conspiracy that come up with an even crazier version of that conspiracy to make everybody look insane, so that people pay it no heed.
Basically exactly that. So if you're looking at a show that, okay, I'm sure that this show would have many people talking about, oh yeah, Dan Aykroyd's on this new show talking about like cattle mutilations, UFOs, all that stuff. And okay, CIA is going to be a little bit interested, maybe. And back then, it was all about information, tapping in, and just kind of like getting a gauge for what's going on around you. Like information was huge back then. So sure, maybe they put someone in there to work on set, and this guy is looking around, and maybe he notices something. Maybe they're rolling so much footage. 99.9% of that footage could be bullshit, but then all of a sudden you have one shot of a UFO flying in the sky, and this guy recognizes, hey, that's actual footage back then, or something is authentic, and they're like, we can't let people see this, because if we get exposed and reveal this footage at another point in time, they'll be able to connect the dots when we're trying to have plausible deniability. Like, they're just trying to cover their ass, and it very well could be the case with that. Or like the Men in Black thing, just riding in that vehicle out front, that's just a whole nother whirlwind added to this.
And because of how high level this was, and just for the record, this was the Sci-Fi, what we know as the Sci-Fi Channel now. They were the ones that were producing this documentary. So it was airing on a channel totally akin to its kind.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that he had a Men in Black encounter and it got canceled so quickly, and they were doing this about aliens, it makes me think that something government side stopped this. And that's where I kind of think that the Men in Black are involved with government officials in some way, shape, or form. I don't think it's just aliens posing in that sense. I think there's some relation there, whether they're aliens or not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that would make sense. The speed of it, too, just is insanity. But,
and there's reports of Men in Black when they approach people that they walk through walls or just disappear into thin air.
So would you attribute that to being just advanced technology or more the paranormal demonic side?
Probably paranormal, demonic, or alien in some form. especially considering we've explored some quantum topics with Bigfoot and stuff. Who's to say there isn't all these other species that can just do that one specific thing and crosswalk into another reality?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, shit, like, I'm glad you shared the Dan Aykroyd experience, because that was definitely fascinating.
Yeah, it was a good one to call out. That whole time I was thinking, man, who am I going to call?
Dan Aykroyd. I'd love to talk to Dan Aykroyd about all this stuff. I'm going to jot that down on my bucket list someday. Hope maybe someday I'll be going into a coffee shop and there'll be Dan Aykroyd sitting right there and be like,
You should send him an email.
Mr. Aykroyd, yes.
Get him as a visitor in Cryptid Clues.
Absolutely.
We got Ron Moorhead. We can get Dan Aykroyd.
We can get Dan Aykroyd. There you go.
There we go. There's our bucket list for Cryptid Clues, people.
Yes. That is all the information I have on the Men in Black. There's still a lot more out there. Like, looking around, a lot of people have experiences with these unknown characters, and they've definitely become much more Hollywoodized, and that's the tricky part. When you're trying to find information on these guys,
there's so much in the movies.
Oh, exactly. It's like, Will Smith and Tommy Lee Jones.
Yep.
It just defaults to that, and it's like, no.
The real Men in Black stories are a drop in the bucket when you're looking on the internet. And all you see is stuff about the movies. And for what we've covered, we've barely scratched the surface. Just like we've gotten into the big ones like Bigfoot and Dogman. There's so much Men in Black stuff out there. So many theories. So many weird little things. There's entire books and reports and just so much to cover. This is definitely going to be a topic, I think, that we revisit in the near future.
Yeah. And again, some of those things that I found in my research was, again, looking and making comparisons and analysis and what people have written and their books, and just really kind of deep dive into, okay, maybe I can't just pull up Men in Black. Maybe I got to pull up encounters with black SUVs after unknown phenomenon, encounters with black suited individuals after alien encounters, like just stuff like that. You got to really change up the keywords. And I say that because hopefully other people out there, if you're listening, you'll be able to carry on this research, and maybe you'll find things that we haven't. And by all means, you can let us know what you find. I'd love to hear it.
Absolutely. And on that note, Taylor, people can find us over on our email.
They can.
I'll let you carry us out.
CryptidClues@gmail.com. That's how you can find us, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah, like I said, send us an email. If you want to say hi, if you have anything you want to share, let us know. You can also find us on our social media channels, Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook, and on our Patreon, where you can get ad-free, exclusive early episodes and all that fun stuff with some skookum rewards. And additionally, our website, CryptidClues.ca. You can get blog access and all that and learn a little bit more about the show. But yeah, that basically does it, Reuben.
I think now that you brought up the website, you should definitely post the document that you sent me on a blog post.
Definitely. That's definitely blog worthy.
All right. Bye-bye, everybody. See you next time.